Hello and welcome to The League Presents, a show by the League of Women Voters of Newton, where we will talk about topical issues important to our community. My name is Marcia Johnson and I am a member of the LWVN Board of Directors. I want to once again welcome Councilor Deb Crossley, who joins me for our conversation on Village Redesign Part 3, Village Center Overlay District Zoning. I would also like to welcome Jennifer Cairo, who's the Deputy Director of Newton's Planning and Development Department, for this important topic. Thank you both for coming. The Village Center Overlay District, according to the city's website, is a proposed set of zoning regulations for the commercial centers and immediately surrounding residential areas of 12 of Newton's village centers, and is an important milestone in the zoning reform effort which began in 2010. So let's get down to business.
Thank you, Marcia.
Oh, you're very welcome. So I think it would be important to start with a brief overview of the Village Overlay District. Some things are, what are the goals? Why are we doing this? Why is it important? How are you accomplishing it? So just kind of take us back a little bit before we go forward. Okay?
So I think,
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Marcia.
You're welcome.
So the goal really is about the future of Newton's village centers. They act as the heart of Newton, and the goal is for vibrant village centers. We're facing incredible housing shortages, environmental crises, and this is our opportunity to address some of those challenges. Our zoning today really limits housing opportunity. We're seeing mostly single-family homes. It's hard to build smaller, less expensive housing units. People are priced out. Kids can't live in the city where they grew up. Older adults have difficulty downsizing. We're lacking affordable housing, accessible housing, all of the different options for housing. We also need to strengthen the economy. So what we're proposing is to allow for more housing in walkable areas near transit. And this allows us to provide more housing diversity, more housing options in areas that will limit the impacts on the environment. Less reliance on single occupancy vehicles, more incredibly energy efficient buildings based on current building codes and that Newton has adopted. More customer base for local retailers, removing a lot of the red tape for local retailers that they face right now with zoning. Really unrealistic parking requirements that are regularly waived by City Council today can really make or break a new business moving into Newton or an existing business being able to expand and evolve as time goes on. So this really is about focusing on allowing more people to live in Newton and to live in areas where they have access to many amenities and transit.
I think I'll add that, early on in the recent effort, which focuses on village centers, not from 2010, but from the beginning of 2021, the Zoning and Planning Committee all agreed on shared goals. We agreed that we have to enable housing that can serve a diverse range of need. We agreed that housing actually can help to support our local economies, and we see that we want to keep and strengthen our local economies and make it easier for businesses to come in and to stay. We agreed that environmental factors are important that need to underlie this, and we now know, I think as a group, the majority.
This is through your committee.
Through the committee.
Yep.
We now know, we understand that there's a formula that gets us to the right mix of uses at the right density, the right scale, that helps to become a self-supporting local community that will add to the vibrancy of our village centers. It has worked in other communities, many out of state, many throughout New England, however, and we're seeking to achieve that by changing the rules to allow it.
Okay. There are a couple of terms I want to just clarify.
Sure.
When you say density, what does that mean? Because for some people that can be a scary word. So-
Right. So when I say the right density, I mean that we've done these economic analyses to study what we need in order to make a little
need
bit
of what? Housing units, retail, or something?
what we need in order to make the development feasible for
Okay.
housing, for retail,
Okay.
et cetera. So the economic analyses were pretty extensive and did a lot of test fits within Newton to see, okay, what would spur the kind of development we want. On the other hand, we studied the scale. And we want to be sensitive to the existing environment that we have. We know from recent historical sort of look backs that up until 1987, we allowed 6-story buildings by right in the city of Newton.
I think people would find that amazing.
The change in zoning in 1987 was dramatic, removing a lot of property rights from our core business districts, so now only allowing 2 stories by right, for example. So that has severely limited the kind of development we see unless you have a large developer with deep pockets who can ask for a change of zone and wait out the lengthy special permit process. So this was a change to our business zones in 1987 that has pretty much stopped any new development, and the buildings we treasure are the ones from much earlier. The Masonic Temple in Newtonville, which is 4 stories, or 4.5 stories by itself, the Stevens Building in Newton Highlands, the Strong Block in Waban. These are all buildings of, beloved really, and that people are worried about keeping, and some of them are landmarked as historically significant. So, but I do want to just emphasize, we did agree on the basic goals, what are we trying to achieve, and in order to address the housing crisis, the environmental concerns, our climate action plan, et cetera.
Okay. The other term is, what does overlay mean?
Okay, so I'll start on that.
Okay.
So that goes into your next question,
all
I
right,
think, but
okay.
let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
So I'll let Jen talk about how the zoning overlay district is structured, but what is it is an important
Exactly,
question
right.
to ask. So we're not replacing the existing zoning.
So let's be clear. So a zone is, it's like where I live is mixed use 4.
Right,
Okay.
which has a certain set of rules associated with it. Or if you're in a multi-residence district, it has a certain set of
Okay,
rules
great.
associated
Right.
with it.
So that's good.
And so the new zoning I think of it in 2 parts. There's the new zones we've created to lay over the existing zoning in our village centers, in the business districts, that are offering an alternative set of rules to the property owners that they may choose to
Okay, so it's a choice.
adopt. It's a choice.
Okay.
In the residential districts close into the village centers, which are mostly multi-residence districts allowing 1 or 2 family, the new rules incentivize actually keeping the existing buildings, but they allow more units in the existing buildings with minor additions. So again, the homeowner would have a choice. They may choose to do something with the new zoning, in which case they have a new set of rules, or they may choose to just keep what they have and use it as they wish to improve their property.
Great.
As they wish.
So do you want me to go to the next question, and that will lead into what you wanted to say?
Sure.
Okay. I think one of the things in talking to people that I know and love around Newton are kind of confused and interested. So what's going to happen to the village closest to me, one where I go and do my shopping, go to visit the doctor or whatever, because I do know there's not a one-size-fits-all, because that's what we have today. So how the overlay district plays into that, and what might I expect for my community, which is Newtonville, but whether it's Newton Center, Waban, or whatever.
Sure, you're right. It's not, today we have one size fits all. And what we found through our economic analysis was that it's not even feasible to do much of anything under the existing zoning. So then what we end up with is this sort of ad hoc changing of the zone by individual developers in order to allow any sort of new development. And as Deb mentioned, you end up having to consolidate a lot of land, you end up doing something big because there's a lot of risk. You have to go through rezoning, special permit process. What we're proposing is sort of a toolkit. We created 4 new zoning districts as part of this overlay district, and we can use them uniquely for each, to adapt to each village center, because each has its own character, its own defining characteristics. Some have a larger commercial center, like Newton Center. Some have a much smaller commercial center, like Waban, Four Corners. And so we've used these 4 different zones differently across each of the village centers. Some have 2 of the zones, some have 3, some have 4. So we can use the pieces to tailor it to that particular village. And it allows for, in general, what we're allowing for is at the core of village centers, and often the larger village centers, is allowing for 4.5 stories buildings, requiring ground floor commercial uses in those commercial cores where we have it today, and we really want to hold on to that. That mixed use is really critical to the life of the village center. And we can also be more specific about the types of uses we want to see. So we're not allowing banks on the ground floor in the core of the village center in the current proposal. Things that we've heard are not really adding to the life of the village center, some medical offices, et cetera. And then it steps down from there typically. So you go to 3.5 stories as you move away from the core on the VC2, and then the MRT, the multi-residence transit district, provides that sort of soft transition to the neighborhoods. It allows the house scale density that takes what is a single or 2-family home today and allows you to convert it to 4 to 6 units, or to do an addition on the back of it and add some additional units. Adding some more housing within walking distance of the village center. But it's really meant to sort of taper down. We have a 4th district that's primarily along Route 9, the Village Center 1, and that allows for a little bigger footprint than the MRT, but still only 2.5 stories, but allows for some more units, and probably very limited commercial uses. But we get to tailor each of them, the types of uses that are allowed, the design standards that go along with it, the heights, the footprint of the building, to make sure that it fits with that particular village center. A key piece is the footprint.
What's the footprint?
So that's where the building meets the ground.
Okay.
So that's, if you draw sort of a line around the outside of the building, along the edges at the ground floor, that's the building footprint. Right now, our current zoning incentivizes consolidating more land to build a bigger building, because how big your building can be depends on how much land you have.
That makes sense.
We've broken apart that ratio, that relationship, and to say this is the footprint we think is appropriate. This is what fits in. This is what gives you
For a given village center.
For a given village center, a given district. This is what gives you that human scale building that looks like how the villages developed over time. They were more infill, new buildings right up next to each other, but different buildings. You get sort of that more rich fabric. So that's what we're proposing. We're limiting that footprint, so there's no incentive to acquire more and more land and develop a whole block at once. So we expect to see more sort of small infill development. We also took the design standards that end up being negotiated as part of the special permit process, and that are just best practices in architecture and planning, and included them directly in the zoning so that they are required.
So like things like step backs, because I just remember when we were doing things for both Austin Street and the Trio, it's step backs and height differences, so it's not this big brick box.
Exactly. Yeah. Step backs at the top floor, stepping down adjacent to residential. No more breaking the facade, so when you have a longer facade, which you won't see too much of with the max footprint, but having some sort of break in the building, recess, a small courtyard, having transparency along the ground floor, so clear windows along the ground floor. That's a really key piece of our village centers.
And I'll just add, that's different in the village center business district zones than in the multi-residence transit zone, which is really designed to maintain the neighborhood feel.
Oh, that's an important point to raise. Then.
Yes, and we're not allowing commercial in that district either.
Okay.
So the multi-residence transit is really about the buildings look like the existing homes or are the existing homes, but can just be a few more units than what's allowed today.
We've been talking since we were developing the comprehensive plan, and certainly when it was adopted, and then when we approved the zoning framework in 2011, about the importance of having what we called soft transitions from the business districts into the neighborhoods. And at the same time, our neighborhoods are very close in to the village centers, much of them within a quarter mile or 5-minute walk to the village center and a T-stop. So it's important to have a slightly different set of standards for those homes, and it's 2.5 stories is the maximum height, just like our existing zoning. But again,
in all of the MRTs, it's all
only
so
2.5 stories, and the VC1 is only 2.5 stories.
And in the MRT, that half story has to be a pitched roof.
Yes.
So you could do a 2-story flat roof or 2.5 pitched roof, because that's really what is existing in most of those neighborhoods.
That's good.
So I'd like to actually focus a minute on the MRT zone, because it's a significant change from version 1 to version 2 in response to a lot of concern about using I guess a more commercial set of rules as you transitioned, and that we felt really didn't work. Many felt it really didn't work. So
or incentivizing tear down of existing homes.
And we don't want that.
So we don't want that. So the MRT zone is unique in that it has 2 sets of rules. One, if you're adaptive reuse using adaptive reuse and keeping the existing building. And there's a lot of incentive to do that versus 2 if there's new construction. So the MRT district or zone heavily incentivizes adaptive reuse. We want,
which is to
you take the existing building,
make it into units or something like that.
Right, and you're allowed a certain maximum amount of addition toward the rear, but you have to maintain the streetscape. There's still design elements that will be allowed in order to make the streetscape interesting and allow people some flexibility in how they use their home. Like you can add an open front porch, you can add a dormer, you can change your windows or something, unless because these are not landmark buildings. They are of historic significance, but we don't want to take rights away from people.
Right.
So, and more is allowed. You have to have at least 3 units if you choose the new zoning, but you may have up to 6 in the adaptive reuse. Whereas, if you're proposing to take down a building and build new, the footprint is limited to something much smaller. You must have 3 units, but you may only have up to 4. So,
so you're encouraging
except by
adaptive
special
reuse.
permit, if it's a gigantic site, but then you hit the special permit threshold, you can have another building. But that's, in terms of what's allowed by right, the incentive is with adaptive reuse.
That's good to know. Great. Anything else on that? And one of the things that I do hear, and we've seen some signs around that people are expecting. This is kind of the impression that I get, that people are expecting huge buildings. So what I'm hearing from you, there are in order to get, like I live at the Trio, so in order to get a 5-story building, that would then, even under the current, what you're proposing, was being proposed or was in process, would be a special permit.
Not even.
No?
So we actually, because we did the economic analysis to show that what we're proposing is feasible, we have not included additional height or footprint by special permit.
Okay.
So we've shown that a 4.5-story building is feasible.
So that's going to be the limit.
That's it,
absolutely.
except
Okay.
we do have an affordable housing bonus.
Okay,
that's
I
currently
knew there was
proposed.
something in there
Yes.
somewhere. I couldn't remember. Okay,
So
that's
if
an
you
important.
provide 25% of the housing units,
All right. So today you require
yes, Today it's about 17.5%,
Right. Okay.
and at a mix of 50 to 80% of area median income.
Good.
We're proposing an additional story, a bit of additional footprint,
Mm-hmm.
if you bump that up to 25%. And then potentially, if you bump it up even further to 30%, a second additional story.
Okay, so there's a,
And council, actually, the committee really still needs to vote
Yeah.
on these.
Right.
This was proposed to us by the Newton Housing Partnership, so it's incorporated in the draft.
Yeah.
And we're very interested in it. We have a lot of deliberation yet to go.
Right, and that's important.
What I understand, for example, is that the option for 2 stories is possible in extremely limited locations because of all the setback requirements and additional setback requirements to residential and so forth. So, for example, some people have said that this one's not worth it. To be seen, because I obviously can't speak for anyone else
Yeah.
on the council, but I've heard it from a number of folks so far. So, and there's a number of things like that that are up for decision starting next week. That we're deliberating through the summer and into the fall as we continue to hear from the public.
so on June 26th, which was just a month ago, right? Something like that. And then July 24th, there were public hearings. And I'd just like to add here that I read into the record a support letter that the 2022-23 board, because it came under their jurisdiction, a letter of support for the implementation of the Village Center Overlay District
From the League Board.
from the League Board and for the MBTA community. So I just wanted to make sure that I was transparent on that.
Sure.
So in those public hearings, and probably through letters and so whatever, what have you learned from residents, around, so we talked about something, so I know parking's an issue, so what have you learned?
We've learned a lot.
Okay, so what are some of the key things you've learned?
So I'm seeing we have short minutes left, so I
Yep.
just want to say
Yep.
we've been learning from the public and from public engagement and from the community and organized groups who have been doing a deep dive into zoning over the 2+ years that we've been doing this. We've learned a lot from a lot of conversation. And the current version before us now reflects that. What we've heard in addition is, I would say, and it's pretty consistent what we've heard at the public hearing from what we've heard over time, in that about 2/3 of the folks who have testified so far are testifying well-informed and
Congratulations.
and in support with constructive criticism, okay, which we've been happy to get all the way through.
Absolutely.
And about 1/3 are testifying either an absolute opposition, or they have concerns that are bigger, that they want more change. So that's pretty much how it's gone, but specifically, there's still a lot of information that has to get out there about how this is intended to work and what the actual rules are. Like, there's no way under any circumstances that a 7 or 8 story building can be built.
Well, I think that's the
Yes.
kind of thing that I think is important.
Right.
Because I don't think that's clear for some.
Folks have concerns about infrastructure, and that seems to presume that all of what's being enabled by the proposed alternative zoning is going to actually be built and actually be built very quickly, not giving us time to respond, as the city must do. It's the city's job to plan for the future. That's what this whole project is about. But development tends to happen more slowly. It's more methodical. It's opportunistic. You can't do it if a property's not up for sale,
Right.
or if the owner doesn't want to do something different. So we think infrastructure is not an issue. I think it's not an issue. We know we have huge capacity in our water systems. We know we have been planning for our school population for a long time, and the population is dwindling, in fact. So things like school population, fields, those kinds of community resources, we have time to plan. Our population in Newton has been much bigger in the past, up to 93,000, I think, in the 60s.
That's right.
And we managed with our old school buildings. So there's time, and it's our responsibility. Shared parking is the city's responsibility. The city gets more money to invest in our village centers and our community with sort of moderate, ongoing, flexible development taking place. So,
And one of the misconceptions about the parking is that requiring parking is good for businesses. When what we find is there isn't much, the parking doesn't exist today, and requiring them provide it is just placing a burden on those businesses.
on-site parking.
Right. It's all about managing the resources the city has today.
Right, because I know that was a big issue, and always has been.
It
And I
always
think-
has been an issue, and you know, right now, I suppose if we have time, we should say that the current proposal, and this could be changed, but requires no on-site parking in any of the zones, which actually helps us in the MBTA community's compliance formula by giving more space for units, less for parking. But we know parking's going to be built, and it is allowed. So
It's just not required.
exactly.
Right, great. Well, I really want to thank you both. Thank you to Deb and Jennifer. And as this closing out the part 3, maybe will be a part 4. I don't know, but soon to be learned. But thank you for joining me this afternoon for this conversation about the Village Center Overlay District Ordinance. It is an important topic for our community, and I think the information that you provided really is going to help people to better understand what the city is trying to achieve and why. For viewers, please contact the League of Women Voters of Newton with comments or ideas on this show and on future topics by emailing info@lwvnewton.org. The specific comments and opinions made during this program do not necessarily represent those of the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, multi-issue grassroots organization that encourages informed and active participation in local, state, and national government. The League develops positions on issues but does not support or oppose candidates or political parties. Membership in the League is open to all citizens of voting age. You will be able to view this program on New TV or find a link to the show on the League's website, lwvnewton.org. Also on the League website are links to all our past episodes of the zoning redesign. On behalf of the Newton League of Women Voters, thank you to our guests and to our wonderful crew. We have some new folks, which is great, as we begin the transition to a hotter summer than ever. I hope you all can stay inside, stay cool, stay hydrated, but enjoy the weather and enjoy your summer and have a wonderful time and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.